Today, this library and the grounds are owned by the Johann Fust Library Foundation. I am Cappy Powell, and I'm very proud to serve as president of the foundation board. Today, we gather for our one fundraising program. Thank you to all of you who bought a ticket to join us today, especially to our community sponsors, Gulf Coast Community Foundation and Northern Trust, who have been loyal supporters. And a special thank you to Jeff and Shima McCart, who are opening up their home today for the sponsors reception for our first edition and bestseller sponsors. Our board and foundation staff talked a lot about how we should celebrate 75 years. And we concluded that with all your support, that we celebrate the Amorys and their vision for their gift to the community by fulfilling our mission to maintain the space and providing a cultural center for the community to gather every day. Shortly after I joined this board, I ran into Kathy Aslan here with her daughter Meredith, visiting from New York with her daughters. Meredith told me that she used to come here with her grandmother. We hear from third and fourth generation visitors all the time. Daily, we see our friends checking out books or reading the newspaper in the loggia, Jack Carley, perhaps working remotely, showing off our shell collection to their island visitors, or bringing their families to the children's library and Alice's Secret Garden. Grandchildren participating in the activities that Stacy, one of our Lee County librarians, designed for them, or maybe you've just come to take advantage of our media center. Every time one of you walks through that iconic front doors, you are part of helping us honor and celebrate Roger and Louise Amory and their gift to our community 75 years ago. This loggia was used in the 1950s on Saturday afternoons to broadcast the Metropolitan Opera radio program. We don't do that anymore. But tomorrow we invite you to our Island Book Blast, which will give you an opportunity to meet 20 of our local authors and learn about what they are writing. The Book Blast is a tribute to the Amorys and their vision of the cultural center. This space is a cultural center. In addition to this library building, 75 years ago, the Amorys also put their personal boat to use to carry books from this library 3 times a week to Pine Island, Usepa, Cabbage Key, Captiva, and other neighboring islands. I don't know whether they had any live author interviews in the courtyard back then, but wouldn't Roger and Louise love to know that an author that has his 42nd book coming out in May and has sold over 9 million books worldwide is right here today. In the 1950s, books became popular mostly through word of mouth, not through podcasts or social media companies. And since there was no internet, no online booking sites, ebooks or audiobooks, you would either wait for the library doors to open, or if you're on those islands, wait for the boat to come. Not to mention there is now something called streaming, where you can watch a screen adaptation of one of Michael Connelly's books, Bosch or Lincoln Lawyer books, in the comfort of your home. A lot has changed over 75 years, but our community's love and support of this library has not. And we are still a community of readers, no matter the format that we choose today. As I said at the beginning, we only have one fundraising program each season. Michael Connelly, thank you for being here with us today. You are now a part of our history. And today, we are fortunate to have with us 3 of our other past fundraising speakers, our island icon and literary advisor to the foundation, Tom McQuain. Last year's very popular author, C.J. Box, is back this year, and this year as a sponsor. And thank you, Chuck, for suggesting Michael to us for this year. And finally, my friend, author and fellow board member, Linda Fairstein. Last week, Linda, Michael, and CJ were all 3 at the Rancho Mirage Writers Festival, which is described as a world-class gathering of the finest writers who contribute to the intellectual vitality of our time. There were over 1,000 readers at Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory for that event last week. We could only accommodate 250 of you. But we will get a bit of the Rancho Mirage experience today because Linda and Michael are going to recreate the program they participated in last week at Rancho Mirage. Before I turn it over to them, I would like to thank our entire board, especially Program Chairman Stephanie Furman and our book sponsors, our volunteers, and particularly our foundation staff, Deanna, Bobby, and especially Julianne with a little help from Pat. It has been no easy feat to plan for both tonight and for tomorrow's Book Fest, but they have done so with grace, with great enthusiasm, and genuine love for this community. So thank you.
Thank you, Cappy, for that history and very warm introduction. Thank you to my fellow board members for your thoughtfulness and generosity, to the staff and volunteers of this great library, and to Chuck. I don't recognize you without the cowboy hat, but there you go. Thank you for coming back and your generosity. I know you and Michael are good friends. Michael Connelly, adding your grace and star power to our... Oh, don't laugh, you have it.
Glad to be here.
Good. So, just rare that I would correct Cappy, but it's 90 million books, not 90 million books that Michael Connelly has sold. He's very understated and humble, and he would not do that. And he's been translated, his works, his books, into 45 languages. So it's really quite an incredible record. I'm not going to recreate Rancho Mirage for fear that any of you watched us on a video. So it's all new notes and cards and lots of new questions. We also have movies, television series, and a podcast to talk about. But I'm going to start with some background. And I would love you to tell our audience when you came to Florida first and about your education here and what led you to your first career.
Sure. I'm actually a Floridian. I was born in Philadelphia, but my family moved to Fort Lauderdale when I was 12. And I stayed here. I went to school here. I went to the University of Florida, met my wife, who's actually a native Floridian, at school there. And I worked for a newspaper in what I consider my hometown, Fort Lauderdale. Worked there for about 7 years before I was offered a job out in Los Angeles. So when I was 30 years old, came when I was 12, left when I was 30, but we still have a home here just up the road a little bit, and enjoy coming back here as much as we can.
Good.
For the warmth, but it kind of backfired.
A little misguided this trip. We tried. Would you tell us, when you went to the University of Florida with Linda, what were you interested in doing, did you think, as a student at first?
Yeah, I went up there for an engineering degree. I was going to build houses with my father. That's what he did. He was a developer. And, two things happened. One, I started flunking out because, I literally took a class called Introduction to Concrete. And it was about all the 7 different kinds of concrete and the formulas, and it was like, I was 18 years old, and that's not really what I wanted to learn. And so I was doing very badly, and I was going to the dollar movies at the Student Union, and I saw a movie called The Long Goodbye, a Robert Altman directed film based on a Raymond Chandler book. And I loved the movie, and I then went over to the bookstore and bought the book and read the book, and then I motored through all of Raymond Chandler's books, and by the time I finished, I was no longer going to class, and I wanted to become a writer, particularly a crime mystery writer, and it wasn't like my first exposure to reading. My mother loved mysteries, and I'd read a lot of them, but something about reading the Chandler books tipped me into a new direction.
And you went to work for the Sun Sentinel, which many of us knew as a newspaper, which always had a great book section and book reviewer. Did you go right away to the crime beat?
Yeah, I mean, well, I had to drive home and tell my dad we're not going to be. Plans changed, Dad. And I was actually bracing for like this is not going to go over well, but it went over very well. And he said he's the one who said, if you really, it's not you just don't want to be a novelist, you want to be a crime novelist, then I would advise you to go back up to school and switch to journalism and get a press pass and be in police stations and be in courtrooms and learn the world that you want to write about. And what you're talking about doing is a long shot, but maybe this will be the best way of getting you in a position to take that long shot. And so it's amazing advice. That's what I did, and then here I am. So really that was kind of one of the more lucky things that happened to me in my life.
It certainly sounds generous of him. It's not the typical parental
Right.
advice. So you started working at the Sentinel. How difficult, one of the things, and we'll continue to talk about it throughout, is your ability to write police procedurals. I think they are. I don't mean to categorize you, but you do stunning dialogue, dialect, acronyms, have you said, of police usage. And how easy or difficult was it for you in Fort Lauderdale, smaller town, but still a city, to get into the police world?
It's actually, the smaller the town you have, I find it's easier. When I got to LA, that was very difficult. But this was in the '80s, and Fort Lauderdale was a lot smaller than it is now, and it became a situation where I could just like walk into the detective bureau and say, what's going on? That doesn't happen anymore, probably in any place, but definitely not in Los Angeles. And so it was easier for me to get to know detectives and know about their lives and see more than just them out like at a crime scene, see them when they're a little bit more relaxed, I guess you could say. And so even though I write about Los Angeles, the roots of what I do firmly embedded in Fort Lauderdale. I mean, I think there was a guy who was in charge of the homicide squad in Fort Lauderdale named George Hurt. And I think there's more of him in Harry Bosch than any other detective I've ever met. And spending time with him was a key part of whatever my maturation or whatever you want to call it as a writer.
That's great to hear. I had a detective like that when I worked as a prosecutor in New York who I think colors my main detective, and he would frequently see me in the courthouse and say, do I get any royalties? Your guy better with it than mine?
Yeah, I think he never claimed any royalties.
Okay. The reporting career must have helped you when we talk about how much you write and how now there are 4 book series that you're doing. Must have helped you with deadlines and meeting deadlines at a very early age.
Yeah, I mean, I was a newspaper reporter when the business was very profitable, and that meant that newspapers were what they call all-day papers. They would do different editions. Even in a place like Fort Lauderdale, there was an afternoon paper, there was a morning paper, and you'd update it through the day. So the work ethic, I was constantly writing, I was constantly taking stories, and I might not have any new information, but I would have to rewrite them so it felt like it's been updated in some way. And I really work off of that now. I've never had writer's block. I don't, in a newspaper that can't happen. You never say I don't have it today, boss. You got to write. You got to write, and I think it's really helped me a lot over the years to kind of keep the pace that I keep in terms of publishing.
A wonderful thing to be able to have. You talk about Raymond Chandler, who was obviously an influence early in your life. Are there other literary influences that you had as a young adult before you started writing or up to the time you started writing?
Yeah, I mean, myriad influences. at University of Florida, I had some classes from a guy named Harry Cruz, who was not a mystery writer, but he's kind of a Southern Gothic writer, and he was the first author I ever saw when I went into his class. It was the first time I ever saw a real author, and he was quite a character, and he was influential both as a character, but also I loved his books. I loved what he said about writing and how he viewed it, and that was very influential as well.
I know you did what I would call an homage to Edgar Allan Poe, so I take it early on you read a lot of Poe?
Yeah. I was a pretty voracious reader, so I was reading what I could get my hands on, but Edgar Allan Poe was definitely a big one.
One of the favorite stories I stumbled on about you is that for a time in LA, you lived in an apartment building, maybe it was the High Tower Court apartments, that you lived in because of a literary background.
Yeah, that movie I saw up there at the University of Florida, Long Goodbye, the private detective Marlowe, played by Elliot Gould, lived in this really kind of what I thought was a very cool apartment with like a round living room with windows that looked out on Hollywood. And so when I got out there, and I went out there in 1987, there was no internet and GPS and stuff. It actually took my reporting skills to find that apartment, but I did find it. And I knocked on the manager's door and said, is that specific apartment available? And he said no, and he said, like, you're the third writer to come here this week. So that movie influenced a lot of people. And so I gave him my LA Times business card. I said, well, if it comes open, call me and I'll rent it. And years went by, and I worked at the LA Times for 7 years. So I had left the Times. So we're talking about 10 years later, he called the number on that card. And luckily, that number was on a desk that a friend of mine from when I did work at the Times, and she said, he hasn't worked here in a long time. What's this about? I can get a message to him. And so I got the message, so I did go and rent that place, kind of as a place to write, and then people would knock on the door all the time, and writers and would-be writers saying they wanted to see it. So it was kind of this weird, not weird, kind of fun and meaningful history to that place, all because of a movie the movie came out in 1973, and it's still revered. And what's really cool is Elliot Gould is in my show, Lincoln Lawyer, and we have talked at length about that movie.
And about the apartment.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a prop I didn't have with me, but in my collection of Michael Connelly first editions, some of which are inscribed and some of which are unsigned, I found a picture
There it is.
of the apartment. So I'm going to ask Bobby and Julianne to post it on the website, but it's a very iconic building in LA.
Yeah, it's protected, and it, historical site now.
Who lived in Hollywood Hills first, you or Harry Bosch?
Harry Bosch, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I found his house when I was up in the hills on a crime story there, on a murder actually, and as a reporter. And it was a really interesting story because it had celebrity involved. A woman was found dead in front of the painter David Hockney's house. So those two things, murder and celebrity, get up there, the editor said. And so while I was waiting for the cops to come to the yellow tape and tell us what's going on, I was walking around, and there was this what they call cantilever house that had burned, and they had just cleared all the wreckage, and it was just a platform, and yellow tape saying danger. But I went under the tape and walked out there to see what the view was, and I was writing the first Harry Bosch book, and I knew I wanted him, within the means of a cop, to have a place where he could look at the city that he protects. And so I realized this is it. This is where Harry Bosch will live. And what's strange is that was in probably 1989, and that it was never been rebuilt. It's still just stilts sticking out of the ground.
Oh, that's an interesting fact. So Harry Bosch was first published in 92
Right.
in a book called The Black Echo. And we have on this island, I would say per capita, more writers, more novelists, journalists, poets, historians, nonfiction writers, memoir writers. And I think everybody is interested in the process of getting published. Would you tell us, you're a journalist, you've not, I don't think, written a novel before.
No.
How did you come to be published?
Well, I'd written 2 novels that never saw the light of day that were learning experiences. So when I had The Black Echo, I thought that one had a good shot at being published. And, so I got a list of agents. This was, again, before the internet, so I think it's a lot easier to, but I basically had to comb through books and in acknowledgments find names of agents of writers who I admired or was trying to emulate, and I sent out letters. I exaggerated my skills and my awards at the LA Times and all that kind of stuff. It just to get somebody to say, yeah, look at some of your pages, and then it takes a long time, but I eventually ended up with the agent that it was actually #1 on my list. But the reality was, as soon as someone said, I'll represent you, I was going to go with that person. And I was just lucky that it was, I had gotten a bunch of no's, and then I finally got a yes, and it was the guy I wanted the most.
That rarely happens. That's pretty good. And the first printing for that book was, my research, 12,000 copies. Very respectable for a first novel. Do you have any idea now, you remember, what a Bosch first printing is today in the U.S.?
It's like something like 250,000. I mean, they've gone down because now they can print so fast. I mean, the business is different now. They used to, it was stack them high and watch them fly, or hopefully they'll fly or whatever. So they would really print before it got such a refined way of publishing it, they would print like 400,000. And then they'd have tens of thousand returns, And so now that's what they're trying to stop. So they really print to order. Mm-hmm. And then they can reprint very quickly.
So tell us about the name Hieronymus Bosch. I mean, most of us know who the artist was and a little bit about him. How did you settle on that name for your hero?
Again, that's a Florida story. When I went to college, I took a humanities class where the professor was really interested in Hieronymus Bosch, the painter from the 15th century. And if you're familiar with his work, there's all kinds of stuff going on. They're basically allegorical about the wages of sin, right and wrong, that kind of stuff. A lot of religious iconography and so forth. But you can look at them for hours and still not see everything, and that's what makes them really interesting. And because the professor was interested in it, we studied them for a long time. And so then when I'm writing the first Bosch book, I actually, in the first couple drafts, called him Pierce, and which was a nod to Raymond Chandler, who had wrote an essay about. I think it was called The Simple Art of Murder, and it was about being what goes into a fictional detective or any kind of detective, and he kept using the word pierce. And the detective has to pierce all veils of society, and use Pierce a few times. So I was calling my detective Pierce, no first name. And then I don't remember what it was, but something reminded me about my studies of Hieronymus Bosch, and I thought that would be a really good name because, again, before internet, and so it was quite obscure. Now you can just type the name in and see all of his paintings on a computer, but at the time I was thinking people will either know who this painter was and they'll get the metaphor that his most famous work is called The Garden of Earthly Delights, and I was working with this metaphor that Los Angeles is the modern Garden of Earthly Delights, and it sounds nice, but there's like some really dark stuff in that painting, and that's LA, beauty and darkness, and so to me it was a win-win situation that people would either get it and understand what I was doing, or they would be intrigued, like, what does this name mean? Hieronymus Bosch, where's that come from? And that they would keep reading, hoping to find out what it means. And so it kind of worked out.
I would say. Did you keep your day job after The Black Echo was published?
Yeah, I kept it for 4 books or 4 years. And I thought it was because I had that press pass, and I was, doing what my father said. I was talking to like 100 real detectives a week, and I was every now and then, if you get burned out on the cop beat, they put you on the court beat, which is more or less the same. I would just see trials of the crimes I wrote about as a cop beat reporter, but that was their way of giving you a break, and I just thought I needed that. For my books, I needed that access. So I stayed the job longer than I should have or had to. But then I kind of reached this point where I really had to decide whether I want to be the best reporter I can be or the best novelist I could be. And so I asked for a 6-month leave of absence, which they gave me. And during that time, I realized my writing is improved because it's my sole focus. I wasn't going off to write 7 crime stories every day. And so the writing was on the wall. I had to quit, and I did.
Thankfully for us. I believe your first book signing, and this is something that a lot of authors do, but I think it's always been especially important breaking through with crime novels, was at the Poison Pen in Scottsdale, Arizona, with Barbara Peters. Sound right? She claims it.
Yeah, yeah, she likes to claim that. So we'll go with that.
Okay. So talk a little bit, since LA had about 5 of them. There was a phenomenon that are mystery bookstores, and at the height of great bookstores independence, and we have a great one here called The Tide. Our friend Carolyn owns The Tide, not mysteries, but she does feature Connelly and Box prominently. And there were about 5 in LA that only sell mystery and crime novels. There were 4 in New York. Poison Pen still exists in Scottsdale. Murder by the Book in Houston. And they were always on book tours. And I still think when you promote, you do. They were great to starting crime novelists.
Yeah, they were really safe bastions. I mean, going on a book tour when you're new is a scary experience. You don't know who will show up. And sometimes no one did. But you're always welcomed in these mystery bookstores, and you could always count on them to get some of their regular customers to come out. And also there was no internet to spread the word. And they were little community tent poles for readers of crime fiction, and they would spread the word about what's new and what's good and things like that. So they were a key part of my career for sure. And it's a shame that they're mostly all gone. Like there's none left in Los Angeles.
None. Wow. We still have in New York Otto Penzler's mysterious bookshop, and it was Otto who put The Black Echo in my hands for the first time. So
that's how it works. These owners would know what their customers are looking for, and if they have something in that subgenre that this reader, this customer really is into, they would put the book in their hands.
So I'd love you to tell us a bit about Bosch and how you created him. Just back question, your first 2 kind of in-the-drawer novels, did they have a detective character? Were they crime novels?
Yeah, they were private eye novels. I had written a story. This was when I was in Fort Lauderdale working at a newspaper. I wrote a story about a private eye who's special. Back then, Fort Lauderdale was called the runaway capital of the world. And this guy had a whole business where he would advertise in northeastern newspapers, basically saying, "I'll find your kid." And because a lot of the kids that ran away would come to the southern climes, and so his whole business was finding runaways, and he knew the places where they would end up, usually on the beach and so forth. And so I wrote 2 novels about a guy who did that. And they, like I said, they were learning experiences. The most important thing was the second one was better than the first. So I knew I was kind of, I might be able to get there. But I also felt like I should change things up for before I took a third chance at writing or a third try, third swing. And that's when I started applying to newspapers around the country, and I wanted to find a new locale to write about. Very lucky that, I was going to go, like my agent later, I was going to go to whoever wanted me. First newspaper that said, "We want you," I was going to go there. But in my heart of hearts, I wanted to go to Los Angeles, and they were the first newspaper that asked me to come out. So it was another lucky moment. And so the third time was the charm, and that was the Harry Bosch book.
Indeed. Something you, Michael, may or may not know, and I'm pretty sure you have detailed files about Los Angeles policing in the 70s, because we may go to a prequel someday. We'll get to that. But in the 70s, when we were forming in New York City the first special victims unit, we were looking around the country to see how other cities handled it. And the city of Oakland, California stood out. It was a totally African-American community, a totally white police department. And there was a rubber stamp that was official of the department with 3 letters on it. N, like Nancy, H, like Harry, I, like investigation. And for every sexual assault case that involved sex trade, gangs, drugs, for homicides related to those issues, the cases were not investigated. There was a stamp put on them that said, "No human involved." That was the NHI. Never. It's a fact. You can Google it. 20 years, within 20 years, you created a character who has become iconic in this country, in literature and on film and streaming, what do you call them? Streaming things. And his mantra is, everybody counts or nobody counts.
Right.
Tell us how it's really, it's what I come away from every time I'm with your characters. And I think it's a pretty profound thing that you settled on, expression that you settled on, and character trait in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, no one ever said that phrase to me, but I got it from cops I knew that really put their heart and soul into their work. And, and when I get to know that, I try to spend as much time as I can with the kind of people I write about. And maybe they start as sources, but they become friends and colleagues and so forth. But this one guy who I'm still very close to and helps me all the time with Harry Bosch, once I get to know somebody pretty well, I start getting into their character and this job, as you know, takes people into human darkness, and a lot of them have told me over the years that they look at it like the law of physics. For every action, there's an opposite reaction. Throw a ball against the wall, it bounces back. You go into darkness is going to get into you, and you got to figure out how to keep yourself or stop it from metastasizing into something really bad. And a lot of cops can't do that. A lot of it, it becomes a cancer, like a moral cancer. And so I'm really interested in how they keep themselves safe. And eventually, if I get to know them well enough, I ask them, "How do you do that?" And this one guy told me this story about how he was giving his mom a ride along, and he suddenly got a call that there's a multiple shooting. A gang has had a shootout in a parking lot of a Kmart that's closed, and he had to take it. And so he told his mom, "Stay in the car. I got to set up this scene. I'm going to be in charge of it. I'll get you back to your hotel as soon as I can, but don't leave the car." And so he's setting up this thing, and there's 3 guys have been shot. 2 are dead. One's about to die. They know he's circling the drain, as they say. They're not even doing triage. And anyway, so he's setting everything up and making the calls, and he looks back, checks his car to make sure his mom's okay, and the car is empty. And he looks around, and he sees his mom next to the guy who's dying, and she's holding his hand. And he runs up to her and goes, Mom, what are you doing? What are you doing? I told you to stay in the car. And she said, I don't think anyone should die alone. And he said, that saved me. And the everybody counts or nobody counts kind of came out of that story.
That is a great story. Thank you for telling us that. You stepped away from Harry Bosch with your 5th book, The Poet, Edgar Allan Poe, part of that. And it's got one of my favorite openings of all your books, Death is my beat. I make my living from it. I treat it with the passion and precision of an undertaker. You were then writing in the voice of a journalist, Jack McAvoy. It's also Bosch's, Death is his beat, and of course, it's yours with this career. Stephen King, by the way, wrote an essay about this book in which he calls Michael's prose elegant, among other things. It is elegant. So why did you leave Bosch to do this, and how long did you stay away from Harry?
I kind of, who knows what to do next, but I kind of just felt instinctively that I would burn out if I only wrote about Harry Bosch. And so I felt like I should take breaks. And I just quit being a journalist, so I thought, I'm going to put a cap on that career by writing about a journalist. And, death is my beat. That's what I did when I was a reporter. I wrote murder stories. And I had to talk to people who had the worst thing happen to somebody in their family. And it's a tough thing to do. And I just wanted to try to capture it in a novel that would also serve as a thriller. And as you said, I had been labeled as a police procedural writer, which I think has a ceiling to it. And I was learning about the publishing business, and I understood that they can chug along with series fiction, but if you give them a good thriller, they really know how to tee that up and hit it out of the park. And so I endeavored to write what would be called a thriller, not a procedural. And that was what The Poet was.
I commend it to everybody. 2005, The Lincoln Lawyer, new series for you. Mickey Haller, character who is related to Bosch.
Yep.
Surprise, somewhere, some of us along the way. The Proving Ground, this book, is the latest Mickey Haller, and the new streaming series, we're coming to TV, I promise, started airing last night. So if you have nothing to do later, go on home. You pivot from Mickey Haller, who is a defense attorney in all of the books. He's now in federal court, which is a whole new skill set you'd have to learn, I assume.
Yeah, it's you just kind of instinctively know that you need pivots. You got to have a character change if you're going to try to sustain a series over several books or several years, and so you look for significant changes. And the last time we saw Mickey Haller, it ends with him saying, "I'm kind of finished now. I'm done with being a criminal defense attorney." And so that could have been the end of the series, but I really loved that character. I loved writing about him. So I just kind of reinvented him, or he reinvents himself as a public interest attorney. And, I was inspired by a case here in Florida. That's a very sad case, and involving AI and chatbots in the hands of 14-year-old kids and what can happen. And so I kind of build a story out of that.
And what was the accidental meeting after a baseball game that gave you the idea of a lawyer who works out of his car?
Well, I went to, this goes all the way back to, I think, 2001. I went to opening day of the Dodgers, which is Tuesday, always a Tuesday, and it's a 1 o'clock game. And so it's in the middle of the week. So you see a lot of guys wearing white shirts and ties because they're playing hooky from their jobs. The stadium is right by downtown. And so I ended up sitting next to a guy wearing a shirt and tie, and I said, "Where are you playing hooky?" And he goes, "I'm a lawyer, but I have a hearing at 4, so I'm keeping my tie on." And he said he was a criminal defense lawyer, and so I started talking to him about that. I asked him, I had covered courts, and I know there's, at that time, there were 40 courthouses in LA County. It's such a big and sprawling place. And so I said, "Where's your office?" Because that would tell me what courthouses he worked out of. And he said, "I work out of my car." And I probably did this. Like, I moved away from him. And, because I thought, like, that doesn't sound like a very successful career. And he goes like, no, it's really the way to do this. There's 40 courthouses. There's 400 miles of freeway in this county. And I cover the waterfront. I cover everything. I have case, will travel. And he told me the whole setup. I use a driver who's paying off his bills to me while I sit in the back. I always play... I love drug cases with wiretaps because I can play the tapes while I'm driving and charge my hourly rate. And he had it down. And the capper was, he said, "I'm actually quite successful. I live in Malibu, and my neighbor is Matthew McConaughey." And about 10 years later, Matthew McConaughey was playing him in a movie.
That's pretty good.
And typical of LA, you don't know your neighbors. God, you can't meet your neighbors in LA. And so he never met Matthew McConaughey till the premiere of the movie.
That's a great story. 2 more series. So Renee Ballard, female detective, founder in the Late Show in 2017. And I love her. I think she's a great character. And there's now a series called Ballard. Pull it up. It's streaming. I hope there's a season 2.
Yeah, we start filming that on Monday.
Excellent. And that was almost an accidental or an unexpected meeting with a female detective named Mitzi Roberts. Is that fair?
No, it wasn't accidental. She was the partner of the guy whose mom brought him out of the darkness, and I would meet with him regularly, and he one time said, "I have a new partner, can I bring her?" And so then I met Mitzi Roberts, and Mitzi Roberts was helping me with my Bosch books, and I was stupid. I didn't ever say to her, she was pretty young. She got into homicide when she was 29, which is really young for LAPD. And so I finally said, "How'd you get in?" And she said, "Well, I volunteered for the worst job no one wants, and that's the midnight shift detective in Hollywood." And then that was like that guy at the baseball game. I immediately knew that could be a neat character because of the variety. It wasn't just murder, murder, murder like with Harry Bosch. It was midnight shift anytime they needed a detective for any kind of crime, any kind of investigation, you get the call out. So that's how that started. But I knew her for about 5 years before I asked that question, which I kind of regret.
I love that series. It's a great series. And the newest one, which was I read last summer, you can get at the Tide, Nightshade, which is set on Catalina Island, a new locale, a detective named Stillwell, no first name. And we're going to see another book in that series, Ironwood, in 3 months. What made you go to Catalina, Ann?
Again, I mean, I'm reviewing how, like, I hear something and I know it's, or I really think it is, a good idea. And I found out, I mean, this wasn't somebody I met, but I learned that there was one detective. The island of Catalina is 22 miles off the coast of L.A., and it's part of L.A. County, so it's under the jurisdiction of the Sheriff's Department. And I heard that, I forget actually how I even heard this, but I heard that there was only one detective on the island. And again, that's that same kind of variety of being on the midnight shift in Hollywood. Whatever happens out on that island, this one detective has to handle it. So again, I knew I could go from, like, the next book, he has this big graffiti investigation. You know, he's doing crimes like graffiti and murder. And that variety really keeps me interested. And you know, it's like a small island, big crime is the way I look at it. It's like a little microcosm where I can do whatever kind of strikes my fancy as a writer.
I know I'm getting the sign from Bobby. I have to open it up to you. But one more question speeding through TV. So, Bosch, how much of a role did you keep in writing it? A lot of writers turn the project over to people. And who cast Titus Welliver, now indelibly Bosch in many of our minds?
Well, what I like to do is be involved in the first season of these shows to kind of safeguard the transition of my character from print to visual, and so I get involved in everything. I don't have any kind of contractual say. The only thing that's under contract is that they have to shoot. If you want to make one of my books into a show or a movie, you have to shoot it in L.A. You can't go to Canada and try to make it look like L.A. And a lot of production has left L.A. for places like Canada and Georgia and so forth. And that's the only thing I have under contract. But they usually know, like, hey, I've been writing about Harry Bosch for 30 plus years. You'd think they'd want me to have a say in things, and they do. So it's and I'm a neophyte when it comes to TV, but I went into the first casting meeting with one name, and that was Titus Welliver. I had seen him play a guy with PTSD, and he did it very subtly, but you could tell he was carrying something behind his eyes, and I knew that's what we needed for Harry Bosch. That even in the books, he's very internal. You're like riding in his head, and so to make that transition, you need somebody who can project inner trauma, inner instincts, everything, and I just thought Titus could do it, so I threw his name into the ring, and other names were mentioned, and we went down a road of talking up to a lot of actors, and but eventually when Titus came in and read, everyone knew right away he's Harry Bosch, and he got the job right there on the spot.
And you and he, if I'm not mistaken, have actually written portions or scripts for Bosch Legacy together? Is that fair?
Yeah, and the first show he would do a lot. He would come to me a lot with ideas that he wanted to rewrite or and mostly about dialogue, and he really likes to chop dialogue and be quiet, like Harry is in the books. But yeah, our names are on some scripts together, but you end up on a TV show, you end up rewriting scenes and so forth that will have other people's names on it. That's just the nature of the beast.
I'm going to open this up. I'm not going to thank you yet, and I'm going to tell you that you and I have to talk about now you're in the podcast world, Black Dahlia, and a brand new podcast that Michael filmed in December about possibly the solution of the famous LA 1947 homicide of the Black Dahlia, connected perhaps to the Zodiac killer. So I'll leave you with that cliffhanger. Dial up the podcast. No thanks yet, because we're going to have some questions. I'll just leave the rest of my questions for later. And please feel free to throw in some good ones.
Okay, so I'm over here, and Julianne's going to be over there with the microphone. Anyone have a question? Yes.
Will we see Harry Bosch again?
In books or TV or what?
In the books.
Yeah. Sorry, wait, hold on a second. Yeah, I'm writing a Harry Bosch book right now, and that will probably come out in the fall.
I wonder what influence, if any, Joseph Wambaugh had.
Big one, big influence.
The onion room.
The Onion Field.
The onion
Yeah.
field and the New Centaurians.
Yeah, no, he had a big influence, and I don't want to say I knew him well, but he kind of reached out to me once, and we started a relationship. I got to go with him when he was still writing. I got to watch him. He would just get a gang of cops together and take them out to a bar and let them talk, and that's how he did his research. And I got to go with him a couple times when he did that, and he was always encouraging to me in emails and things like that. I've always said it was not one of his more popular books, but he wrote a book called The Black Marble that I just loved, and and I think there's roots of Harry Bosch in that book. So yeah, he was a great guy, and he was the one who coined the phrase, which I think covers everything we do. And he said, it's not about how cops work on cases; it's how cases work on cops, and that's really at the core of what I do with Harry Bosch, and that comes from him.
Michael, your character is a fan of jazz, and they even have a dog named Coltrane. So how is it you came upon a character like Bosch being interested in jazz?
It wasn't my music growing up, but it was in my house because of my father. And so when I'm putting together this character of Bosch, I wanted him, I wanted to be a writer because of these private eye novels like Raymond Chandler and Ross MacDonald and so forth. But I was a reporter and I had access to police detectives, so I was smart enough to say I'm going to have to write about a police detective, but I wanted him to feel like a private detective, and I wanted him to feel like an outsider. And so there's a lot of like small and big steps to make him feel like an outsider in the creation of that character and in the books. And I just thought jazz would be appropriate because it's kind of not many people are jazz people, and it was also at a time my father happened to be dying of cancer, and it was a nod to him as well to put some of his music into it, and kind of just started from there. Now it is my music. I probably listen to more jazz than anything, but I kind of started as someone who I'm a reporter, or I was a reporter, so I know how to get information, and and so I was talking to the right people about what Harry should be listening to, but it was more like a research, not what I loved, and that's kind of changed over the years.
In your book, Nightshade, why doesn't Detective Stillwell have a first name?
I don't know. You know what he does? His name comes out in the next book, but I just kind of forgot to give him a first name.
So, hi, I'm over here.
Hey.
So, such an honor to be here with you and with everybody here. We're with the Civilelas who have invited us, but I'm a big reader, and I am an aspiring kind of writer. I have my own small practice, but I'm very curious, given how prolific you are, how your writing process and routine has changed over the years.
It hasn't changed a whole lot since I quit being a reporter. So for the first 4 books, I was by day a reporter, and so my wife made a deal with me, or I asked for a deal, where I would get to write 4 nights a week and 1 weekend day, and that's how I wrote my initial books. And then when I became a full-time writer, I quickly shifted to wanting to write early in the morning or start early in the morning. So a perfect day for me would be starting in darkness to write, and then going as long as I felt like I was moving the story along. I don't do anything like 1,000 pages 1,000 words a day or anything like that. I just write till I feel like I've moved the story along. And if you do that every day, you're going to have a book by the end of the year for sure, maybe even before the end of a year. So that's just kind of the way I do it. Harry Cruz, my teacher, up at University of Florida, said if you're going to be a writer, you got to write every day, even if it's only for 15 minutes, and that's a key thing. And he said even if you only get 15 minutes to write, the story's not going to leave your head. It's always going to be churning in your head, and that's what's important. Keep it in your head. And so I pretty much have followed that practice most of my life.
Thank you so much. That's fascinating. Thank you.
Hi, Michael.
Hey.
I've loved all your work. I really loved The Proving Ground. And one of the things I wondered was why you didn't have Wren be an exhibit at the trial. And I actually would have loved Wren to have been a witness, but you couldn't swear her in. But I would have loved her to have been on a screen so that the jury could see what one of these bots is really like and how powerful they are. Did you ever consider having her be
Yeah, so
in court?
Ren is the chatbot robot, and I kind of bluffed that Mickey was going to call her or it as a witness. And I have a couple judges and a couple lawyers that I'm not a lawyer, so I researched these, and especially the judges were saying that he would not allow. He said it's going to happen someday. Someday our AI devices will be witnesses. But as we all know, if you've read any stories in the newspaper, they're not reliable to tell the truth. And so how do you put someone in, I swear to tell the truth, when they don't know what the truth is? And so for that reason, the judges told me this will not happen now. And inevitably, it probably will happen. And so I had Mickey bluffing that he was about to call a witness, but then did not. Call Ren as a witness, but then did not. And I don't think that's a spoiler. It's kind of like a sub-theme through the whole book.
You certainly have found a fertile ground in L.A. for murders and all kinds of evil doings. Do you ever see a day when LA fails to produce ideas and characters for you?
I really don't. Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky in that regard. And the other part is that maybe because it's like the entertainment capital, a lot of people are interested in LA around the world, which when I was a reporter there, I loved the books that were. I was inspired by Chandler and Ross McDonald and Joseph Wambaugh, people who wrote about LA. And so I wanted to write about LA, but I didn't realize how in Japan and in France people are really interested in LA. And so I kind of had an unfair advantage when my books came out. And, my first bestseller was actually in France, not in this country. Because any kind of dystopian view of the America is thumbs up in France. So I took advantage of that as well. But I've really kind of benefited from writing about LA. Just page one, I already know there's people around the world that will be interested in reading something about LA.
Well, does anyone else have a question? Michael, yes, Linda.
Can I close it out before
yes,
you do?
Yes, please do.
With a special thank you. You really have elevated the crime genre that most of us read to a different level. You have really given it a respectability in a literary sense with your prose and your storytelling. And to you and Linda, I'm not going to say where you live when you're in Florida and not LA, but it's not far away. And you're on a barrier island with no bookstore, and we have a really good one, with no library, and we have a great one, and with no golf course, and we've got one on the island and two great ones close by. So we really hope you will both come back before your next 20 million books are sold.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you
for coming.
Thank you.